All right, why don't we get going? So I hope you can all hear me okay. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you all to the Fifth Avenue Association's Diversity in Fashion panel as we celebrate Black History Month. Good morning to all. I'm Jerome Barth. I'm the president of the Fifth Avenue Association, a civic group that since 1907 has been dedicated to the promotion and success of flagship retail, five-star hotels, outstanding dining venues, cultural institutions, and inspirational events, all located on Fifth Avenue between 46th and 61st Street. We are a not-for-profit organization funded by the landlords of the district. Since its beginning, Fifth Avenue has been an iconic destination, a pioneer of trends, and a global powerhouse for brands. With its celebrity status, this esteemed street carries a large responsibility to use its voice for the betterment of society at large, which is why we're all here today. The fashion world is changing, and we want to promote and support what we see as a positive changes that it's making. And now to introduce our panelists, I will pass the microphone, so to speak, to Angela Pennyfeather, our Director of Marketing, and the person who conceived of this event. We have an exceptional group of panelists today, and I hope that you will all enjoy the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerome. Again, I'm Angela Pennyfeather, Head of Marketing for the Fifth Avenue Association. This passion project came to life with the help of our amazing panelists and moderator who are at the forefront when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusivity. I am deeply honored to announce our moderator, Nicole Chapoteau, who is Vanity Fair's fashion editor and will lead this conversation, Fashion and Diversity. I encourage you all throughout this panel discussion to use the chat button, submit any questions that you may have to the panelists, and we will certainly address it during Q&A time. For now, I will turn this over to Nicole.
Hi, thank you everyone. I'm going to preemptively apologize because I do have two little kids in the house and one is losing her mind. So she might scream throughout this thing, but hopefully not. But I just want to introduce everyone today to our amazing panelists. First, we'll start with Cassandra Diggs. She is currently the president of the Council of Fashion Designers of America, also known as the CFDA, which is a group of over 400 American women's wear, menswear, jewelry, and accessories designers. She's a native New Yorker and came from the CUNY education system, where she studied law and political science at John Jay College of Criminal Justice, with accounting from Baruch Zicklin School of Business to oversee CFDA's multifunctional operations, including but not limited to finance and administrative roles. Under Diggs' leadership, the CFDA has experienced unprecedented expansion with the successful relocation of its corporate headquarters to NoHo and acquisition of the fashion calendar. So there is Cassandra, and next I will move on to Corey Smith. Corey is currently the Vice President of Diversity and Inclusion at LVMH. Prior to joining LVMH in September of 2020, Mr. Smith was Head of Diversity and Inclusion at Major League Baseball. Go Yankees! With 20 years in diversity and inclusion and D&I. Mr. Smith has worked in several industries, including manufacturing, technology, education, consumer products, entertainment, media, and sports. He has worked in all of it, it seems like. And Mr. Smith's overall D&I experience includes developing and implementing workforce employees initiatives such as recruitment programs, learning and development programs, training and mentorship programs, executive rotational programs, business resource groups, as well as supplier diversity initiatives. Mr. Smith has also led initiatives around shifting corporate culture. Finally, Mr. Smith has led customer-facing D&I strategies focused on diversifying customer engagement, growth marketing strategy, and experimental activations focused on inclusion. So, and next up we have, oh, and also Mr. Smith is also a graduate of Columbia University. And next up we have Carmen Arocho-Blanco. Carmen is the EI&D advocate and strategist, currently serving as Senior Director of Equity and Inclusion and Diversity for Tapestry. Her role involves developing and implementing initiatives that support Tapestry's vision of creating an equitable, inclusive, and diverse culture where employees, customers, and stakeholders thrive. Prior to joining Tapestry, Carmen served 20 years in media, entertainment, and technology industry and EI&D leadership. Oh, that's really a tongue twister. And talent management roles. Throughout her personal and professional journey, she has sponsored and led efforts drive equality and justice for underrepresented communities. She is a proud Nuyorican. She grew up in Hell's Kitchen. She went to City College of New York and has a master's degree from New York University, which is also my alma mater. So big ups, Carmen. And she currently lives in Westchester. So I guess we can now start our panel. I'm sure everyone has lots of questions, but we're going to save that for the end. And first, we're going to dive into some deep thoughts on 2020, which I would like to say is called the Black Square. We all know that lots of brands posted a Black Square during 2020, the summer of 2020, when we were seeing this reckoning of racial equality and justice that we were all seeking with the Black community, with Black Lives Matter. And so brands posted their Black Squares and then continued on, a lot of them continued on doing the same things that they did, not really supporting the Black community. Their Instagram still looked very whitewashed, I will say. Their influencer programs were still bringing in lots of just white influencers. They weren't diverse. So our lovely group here has been working in this field to tackle this. So I would love to get Carmen's thoughts on the Black Square and where Tapestry basically was like, no, we're gonna go deeper than this.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you for having me and good morning. I think what is clear for everyone and for Tapestry as well is that proclamations of solidarity really weren't enough, right? We're all being held to a higher standard. And I think we can ruminate on everything that happened, but really our focus and Tapestry's focus is, okay, what's now, right? How do we keep the momentum going around, this energy and this inflection point we're in? And personally, like, I see it less as like a backlash and more as like a rise in consciousness. I'm really happy that consumers and employees are considering how brands they support show up and align with their values, right? This is fueling these desires to fight injustice and be more engaged in decisions. And Tapestry is a value-driven house of brands. We hold ourselves to high standards, and it is in our DNA to embrace difference by design. So we're totally looking at this as a great opportunity to connect with our people on common ground and push this work forward.
Thank you. And Corey, how do you feel that LVMH is moving beyond the Black Square? I know that you just started in 2020, actually towards the end of 2020, I'll say, since you started in September. So how do you feel like LVMH has done way more than the Black Square?
Yeah, no, great question. And I will echo Carmen's sentiments and thanking everyone for allowing me to participate in this session. Look, I think 2020 did a couple of things, right? Everybody leaned in and everybody was engaged in a conversation that I think for people of color specifically had been going on for a really long time. And so it was awesome to see allies show up and a level of advocacy that, may not have happened in the past, but we had to get past, as Carmen said, we had to get past just talking about it. It was really time to engage in doing some things. I think for LVMH, there were a couple of steps that have been taken. I mean, literally since September, we've brought on about 7 different D&I leaders across all of our brands, right? And so you talk about literally in the last 6-7 months, the recognition of some of our maisons that they need this position in order to advance this conversation from just conversation to action says a lot about their ability to lean in, but more importantly, their ability to want to embrace change and recognizing that change is needed. We have some of our brands that have really leaned into some action as well. Sephora signed the 15% pledge, in which they're going to absolutely dedicate 15% of their shelf space in stores to Black-owned businesses and Black-owned products. And it wasn't simply just signing the 15% pledge. They took it a step further and said, okay, we're actually going to cultivate those Black businesses. So before you make it to the shelf, they go through an accelerator and incubator program to make sure that their businesses are scaled and at the appropriate capacity to then handle volume by being in a Sephora. So
I think
products on our shelves, but the commitment to developing Black-owned businesses in getting there speaks volumes. And again, Sephora is just one example, but to your point, it was, okay, we did the Black Square, we've all leaned in, now what? And that now what has to be steeped in action.
Great. I feel like this is a great segue to Cassandra, working with the CFDA and American designers. And how do you feel like the CFDA is working towards more inclusion and diversity within fashion?
Thank you for asking that question. I thank you for letting me be on the panel and participate in the conversation. I think, look, 2020 really highlighted the performative nature that people take to crisis and the reactionary steps that people take and how they don't sustain and they don't work. But I think, out of all of that, it accelerated the need for change, and a lot of brands have stepped up and implemented programs that I think are going to lead to that. The Council of Fashion Designers of America has always been at the forefront of trying to bring change to the industry. We've always tried to bring resources to the industry, information that lets the industry know what the challenges are, whether that be around sustainability and circularity, but certainly now around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Interestingly enough, before this happened in 2019, we had begun preparing a research study on DEI with PVH and McKinsey. It got delayed due to the COVID pandemic, but we decided to resume that research in 2020 so that we could take a look at DEI through the lens of Black and Brown and the impact of COVID-19. And we had a lot of findings from that study that we're now using to implement levers of change. A lot of the respondents in that study really felt that they did not have the necessary access and awareness about the breadth of opportunity that existed in the fashion industry. And we've decided to launch a program called Impact, which is really about identifying, connecting, nurturing, and supporting Black and Brown professionals in our industry. And one of the ways in which we need to do that is to provide them that access and awareness. And we do feel that this talent directory that we're launching on Friday will connect talent to brands, will give voice and visibility to talent, but also widen the talent pipeline that brands are so desperately needing. And so we're starting with that. And then we're moving on to some other initiatives that will help anchor and bolster the talent directory and the people that are participating.
This sounds amazing, amazing. I would also like to just kind of maybe not really necessarily backtrack, but Carmen, if you can kind of give a little bit of in-depth of what diversity and inclusivity means in your role at Tapestry, and just for the person who doesn't really understand what your specific job means.
Sure. So first and foremost, diversity is a business strategy, and I am a strategist assigned to lead this work. I think, it has a cultural impact as well, because having a dedicated resource to act as an accountability partner to the organization just signals a commitment and readiness to make progress in this space. But accountability is key, right? I'm not actually doing the work of the work. I'm leading the work. I'm holding people accountable. I'm measuring our results. But it is really our leaders who are leading the work, and the job of all of us to drive this work forward toward a more inclusive organization, where we not only represent every ethnicity, nationality, ability that you can imagine. But once we welcome them into our organizations, that they feel like they can flourish and grow their careers with us. So, I was brought in. A couple of weeks later, I assembled strategy. I was in front of our CEO and the executive committee, and they were ready. And now I'm like taking my show on the road and just sharing with everyone, because I think part of my job as well is just to ensure that everyone in our organization is able to articulate what our goals are, what the strategy is, what our focus areas are. So for us, it's all about talent, culture, community, and marketplace, and ensure that everyone can speak to the business case. And that is what our CEO is holding our team accountable for, and I am holding the entire organization accountable for. So that's sort of how I'm driving and leading in this role.
Thank you. And Corey, how do you feel like what your role at LVMH, how is it making a difference within the culture? Like, what are some of your policies and strategies that you want to bring forth, or that you are bringing forth within LVMH that'll make a bigger global impact?
Absolutely. And so I actually want to piggyback off of what Carmen says, because to your point, right, the way you framed the question was incredible, in that you have to define these terms for people so that there is no misinterpretation around what the strategy actually is, right? And so, I've had to define what the word diversity means and how it applies to the business. The word inclusion, what does that mean and how it applies to the business? The word equity, what does it mean and how it is applied to the business? And so, it's really simple for me. Diversity is just the variety of skills and experiences and things and culture that people bring to the organization. I say diversity is the mix. So the mix of skill, talent, and inclusion is how we make the mix work. Right? And so how do you leverage all of that variety and difference to enhance the business? People interpret difference as a bad thing. Difference is actually what you need to drive the business forward, right? You need that variety of skill set. I need that variety of experience, because that's what, when you get everybody in the same room for a business meeting, that's what breeds the innovation. If everybody is homogenous and they all think the same, I'm guaranteeing the best ideas are not coming out of that room. If it's a room of all men, somebody go get me a woman quickly, because I'm guaranteeing she is going to have a different perspective on how to approach this just based on her experiences in the workplace, right? And so that's diversity and inclusion, the mix and making the mix work. The other word that's been, really paramount lately is equity, because you've seen a lot of people add equity to their titles, like Carmen. And people confuse equity with equality. Those are not the same thing, right? Equality is everything's the same. Equity is how do we get to everything being the same, right? What are the tools? What are the processes? What are the things that are needed for people that are starting at different points to then arrive at equality? Equality is the outcome. Equity is the process in which you get to equality. And so equity is an important strategic imperative in order to deliver this work. So for us at LVMH, the strategy that I've created is around 3 pillars. I think Carmen listed like 4. I listed 3. It's people, business, and brand. That's it. And people is how do we hire and retain talent, all types of talent. The business is how do we operationalize inclusion, right? So that there is a variety and a mix at the table when decisions are being made around the business. So how do you operationalize inclusion to enhance the business? And the brand is real simple. It is any of our logos. There's 75 brands under LVMH. Any of our logos, any of our corporate names, any of our brand names. If somebody sees those, here's our name, sees our logos, how does it resonate with them? Do they feel invited in? Do they feel included? Or are they like, you know what, that's not for me, right? And the brand is all encompassing. It's your marketing and your ad campaigns. It's your website. It's your social media. It's the in-store experience. That's a branding opportunity. When someone walks into your store, your retail environment, how do they feel? How does that make them feel? And if that is not an inclusive scenario, then there's work to do from a branding perspective as well. So people, business, brand is the strategy that I'm implementing at LVMH, and we're going with it.
Thank you so much. I often think that the masses and in general think that diversity and inclusion just means like, let's make sure there's Black people who work here, but there is so much more. It is people with, you know, physical limitations, with just, there's so much more to it. Women, it's your sexuality, it's so much. So I feel like there's definitely a need, since I work on the journalistic side and photos, of telling the story and making sure that there's enough people in the room to get a diverse group telling the story. So I guess that was perfect.
It's absolutely correct. It's, you know, it's a reflection of the different backgrounds and perspectives and experiences, and that's the visibility part. And then there's the voice part, making sure that they're integrated, they're valued, they're motivated, they're engaged, and that they have the power of agency. They're empowered to make decisions and have some say in the opportunities in which are afforded to them. So you have to have that three-pronged approach in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion has to be part of that as well. I think, you know, with CFDA in our impact program, and one of the things we identified is you also have to have some guiding principles, things that, you know, some attributes that you use to sort of like hone your message. One of the things that we know is that it has to be a continuous approach, right? We have to take short-term approaches to get to the long-term goals. It's not something, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not going to happen overnight. There's some work that has to be done. This is a decades, centuries-long challenge. And so it's going to take some time. So it needs to be continuous. It also needs to be all embracing, right? We have to try to shift this current state of inequity into a more equitable state. So we have to embrace that that's going to happen. And then the values have to be shared, right? We know that you can't have a top-down approach. It doesn't trickle down, it has to cascade out. And so we have to make sure that, you know, we share those values in our problem-solving techniques. Also being specific, I think it matters to be specific and have specificity and target the change that you're trying to make. I know there's been a lot of conversation about, you know, the focus on Black, the focus on Brown, you know, there's other groups that need to have equity. And I think you have to be specific. You can't take an all lives matter approach. You have to look at whose house is on fire and quickly burning, and you have to address that situation directly. It doesn't mean that other houses don't matter, it just means this house is more important relative to the moment right now. And then it has to be nuanced. We have to understand that this is going to be uncomfortable conversations. It's going to be sensitive exchanges, but when we have those, hopefully those will lead to a shift in attitudes. And so following those 5 guiding principles has really been helping us as well in our journey.
Thank you so much. For our next segment, I really want to dive into the fashion industry and inclusivity. And something I feel like, I'm sure all of you heard it a lot, is I'm listening, I'm learning, I hear you. I feel like that's something I hear constantly from people I work with, from just people in my community, that just, they're not too sure like how this works within fashion, but what changes do you feel that will come within the industry to bring in this inclusivity, and so that people aren't just always, I'm listening and I'm learning, like it's active, they're actively doing something. So Corey, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, this, it's never lost on me that this is business, right? And so if you are not tying these conversations to dollars, it's a harder sell. And so a lot of what I've had to do, so a few things, you know, again, LVMH is a French-owned company, right? Headquartered in Paris. I'm head of D&I for the North America region, but a large part of what I've had to do is really have conversations with my European counterparts on why these moments, and even the last year, matters so much to us in the United States. If you don't have the historical context of disenfranchisement and marginalization and devaluing an entire population, it's not as urgent, right? And then you couple that with the European ideals and standards around beauty and aesthetic and, you know, the like, and you've got this compounded effect of not understanding, but also not recognizing that things are changing, right? And so education and awareness has been paramount for my success so far. I've literally had to walk certain groups of our leadership through American history through the eyes of race relations. And that's the first place, right? You've got to start somewhere in terms of making sure they understand why this matters. Then you get to how do we implement innovation and change over time. And so, you know, things are changing. For us, it's really the intersection of race, gender, and hierarchy, because no one's one-dimensional. This is not just a conversation around just ethnicity. This is also a conversation around gender. This is also a conversation around hierarchy in the organization and the importance of understanding that the higher up you go, that's where you start to see less diversity. There's tons of diversity in the organization. It's just all down at the bottom. And so the higher up you go, that's where there's lack. And so how do we affect change at the top, right? And that's, again, getting back to our opinions matter, our voices have value, we need to be seen, and we have something to contribute to the organization. And so we've implemented at LVMH, I literally just announced this last week. So 10 years, we've had a gender initiative of increasing women in senior leadership positions at the top. That's been a longstanding initiative, 10 years, and it's been a global initiative. We literally just last week, for Black History Month, we announced a new initiative where we're going to replicate that model for people of color. So we just put up our own goal on ourselves of over the next 5 years, we are going to increase representation of people of color in senior leadership positions to 30%. How we get that done requires a whole lot of work, but everybody is bought in, including Paris, on this new metric and this new goal.
Thank you. I feel like this is a great segue into Carmen. How do you feel, what things that you think the industry needs to do to be more inclusive and to normalize diversity in all aspects of fashion? Because I know that it's something that you touched upon before, was that it needs to encompass everything. So what would you like to implement, or what are you working on at Tapestry to make sure that this is just becomes every day? I think someone had said in a conversation we had before that it should be this diversity and all of this impact should be that, you know, like back in the day, girls weren't allowed to go to school, and now no one even thinks about that. Like, I know my daughter is just learning about Rosa Parks and she's 6, and she was just like, that seems crazy that she couldn't sit in the front of the bus. To her, it's not a normal thing. So how do you feel like we get to the point in fashion where we don't even need this conversation anymore?
Yeah, or we don't even need jobs like ours, in fact, right? I mean, that's
other things.
My goal is to make sure my job doesn't need to exist. But that's a great question. Like, I think there is no doubt there has been, you know, a lot of surface level changes in fashion in terms of representation, in terms of brands designing for accessibility. And I think those are good, because if you could see yourself in a brand, then you can envision yourself being there. A lot of the work that we are trying to do, right, similar to what LVMH is doing, is increase our BIPOC representation in leadership roles, because I think it's probably true for all of us. We're very well represented in retail environments, but when you get up into leadership roles, so we are sort of, I'd like to see the normalizing of BIPOC creators, designers, journalists, right? Our board members, and you know, Tapestry actually has really great representation in terms of gender and ethnicity on our board. But really, in order to truly realize the benefits of inclusion and diversity, we've got to get people from all walks of life into the rooms where decisions about our organizations are being made. And so that is our focus. The way we're driving focus to those areas is primarily, we're working a lot on talent development. We're building greater transparency into mobility practices so people know exactly what it's going to take to get to those upper levels in the organization. We've also, created partnerships externally because we do realize this work is going to take it's going to take a long time. It took 500 years to create the problem. We're certainly not going to solve it this year, right? So we need help. We're leveraging organizations like the Black in Fashion Council, which we recently partnered with, in order to not only have them sort of advise us on best practices, but there will be talent fairs. There will be opportunities to get in touch with, young talent, young Black and brown talent around just introducing them to a career in fashion. If you didn't grow up in one of these big cities or didn't go to a fancy, expensive fashion school, you don't even know that these opportunities are out there, right? That they're even available. So, we're trying to reach to all parts of the community. And the reason why we have an extra pillar, Corey, is because we are very focused on community. And we feel like that's where we can have a really, really big impact. We have foundations, Coach Foundation, Kate Spade Foundation. And last year alone, the Coach Foundation made over $6 million in grants to underserved communities. And I think that is also another area where not only could you acquaint our general population with our brands, but you're really bringing that work, you're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're helping, lift up these communities. All in the spirit of higher education, greater awareness, and like emerging from crises, right? We donated similarly in response to COVID. And I think that's also really important. Our impact on our communities, critical, because not only is that your future talent pipeline and your consumer, but this is where you live and breathe. Right? We're lucky enough to be sort of in New York, where a lot of great stuff happens, and that's part of our DNA, but that scrappiness is also part of our DNA. And we sort of want to be everywhere where our employees are and where our consumers are.
Thank you so much. So I feel like this is actually great for you, Cassandra. Speaking of, nurturing the young people and teaching them about jobs in fashion, I feel like this is something that the CFDA must be honing in on and bringing diversity, because I've been in this industry almost 20 years. And I remember there was a time where there were lots of Black female designers showing. There was like a lot of Asian designers. And then we kind of, I don't know, I guess it's the economy and things changed and people weren't able to show anymore. But now I slowly see that there's a reemergence of diverse designers showing. How does the CFDA helping even more be able to show, especially Black women? Because I feel like there's just really a lack of Black women showing during Fashion Week.
Well, the CFDA is doing a litany of things through impact. One of the things in which we're doing and wanting to reiterate is that we are working on the talent pipeline. We think that that's a very important start to getting people into the C-suite and into the boardroom. So we will be leveraging our partners and building new relationships into many of the untapped talent markets, whether that be historically Black college and universities, city universities, state universities, government agencies with job-seeking programs. We will tap into all of those. We will try to advance the learning opportunities that talent receives as they enter into the program. We are also creating, as I said, a talent directory, which really is trying to create a centralized hub that spotlights the BIPOC talent for industry visibility and widens the pipeline. It really extends to companies a recruitment development strategy and builds a relationship matrix to aid in their diversity. One of the other things that we do and we're also doing is we've released a digital platform called Runway 360. I think, this democratizes Fashion Week a little bit and gives opportunity for BIPOC designers to be featured, to gain visibility. And we will continue to do that every season. We have the Black Design Collective with Kevin Hall, Brandis Daniels, Harlem Fashion Row, and many other designers of color that are on the platform. We also have a designers hub. It's a BIPOC incubator led by Beth Ann Hardison that we've had since 2018. And she's been developing some amazing talent there. Sergio Hudson, Christopher John Rogers, and many of those designers have come through Beth Ann's Designers Hub. We also make sure that we communicate with the industry in terms of where we stand on many issues. Every fashion season, we release a health, safety, and diversity letter to the industry. We urge the well-being of those that participate in Fashion Week, models and young people and makeup artists and all of the ecosystem. We talk about the safety. We have zero tolerance for unsafe environments. We encourage people to report abuse within their workplace. And we also champion a multicultural industry. And we do this every Fashion Week and will continue to do so.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like so great. I feel like really developing into the youth is something that's really important. I know I didn't grow up in the city, so I just looked at magazines, and I don't think I realized at the time that there were like real jobs in fashion. They just kind of seemed like, I don't know, maybe it was also my Caribbean parent being like, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. So I think letting the youth know that this is a real career and you can go really far and you can actually make really great money doing it is something that's great. So I want to jump into your personal goals and to bring more diversity into the industry. What is something, Cassandra, that you really want to see happen to bring out the diversity?
I mean, it's a multi-pronged approach that's needed. It's leadership has to be involved, middle management, junior leaders. I think we have to empower our teams. I think we have to remove vestiges of toxic culture that exist in our workplaces, whether that be power hoarding or defensiveness or, this idea of perfectionism where we fear conflict. I think we have to start having some of these sort of difficult conversations, bringing in conflict so that we gain a better understanding of where we are and where we need to go. I'd like to see more affinity groups within organizations. I think, these groups address unique needs of underrepresented individuals. They promote interaction with leaders to engage and connect. And so I'd like to see more organizations, more companies start these affinity groups. I think my personal mission and my professional mission as I'm on this journey to sort of foster DEI in the industry is really to build coalition. I think that there are many groups doing many things and we all, should exist in this space. And I think the more the merrier and the more momentum that's being built. But I also think we need to coalesce together and find coalition. I'm reaching out to Black and Fashion Council, Raise Fashion. We talked to the Thurgood Marshall College Fund, the United Negro College Fund, many of the HBCUs, building real relationships that endure. Because again, it's not just one entity that's going to solve this. It's going to take all of us participating in various ways. So those are my short and long-term goals for now.
And Carmen, what are your personal goals?
Personally, I would really like to see the industry be a bit less exclusive about what it takes to be successful in this industry or to have good taste or to appreciate quality and design. I think there are very talented people in fashion who were not trained in Europe or in top schools or they've even gained their experience in other industries. And this is something that Tapestry is actually really considering because there is a war for talent out there. The stakes have never been higher in terms of, getting top diverse talent into our organizations. But if we keep leaning into, folks that have had the same internship or, we're all sort of like fishing in the same pond. And so we're really taking, a step back and saying, what are some other industries that we can look at where the skills are absolutely transferable and the rest you can train up. And also, we're an American brand. Our designers, are very focused on quality. And so you do not have to be a designer trained, in European fashion sensibility to come design at Coach or Kate Spade or Stuart Weitzman. And so just sharing that, right, that sort of inclusive spirit of the kind of talent we want to see in our organizations, I think it's critical. And that's personal for me, namely because I'm a bit new to the fashion industry, but because I've seen it work in a lot of other organizations. I also think, you know, to Cassandra's point, employee resource groups, business resource groups, critical for driving business, critical for keeping our sort of, you know, finger on the pulse of what our employees need, especially in large global organizations, right? You can't be everywhere at once. So Tapestry has started 3. We have working parents, which Nicole, you know, maybe this is something you want to bring to Vanity Fair, you know, to sort of help manage, you know, just the life of not only parents, but caregivers. We have the Black Alliance at Tapestry. And we also have Prouder Together representing our LGBTQ+ population. And what the work these teams have done has been transformational. The Black Alliance ERG has actually created the partnerships with 7 HBCUs, created talent fairs. They are, you know, sourcing for our apprenticeship programs, sourcing for our internship programs. When they graduate, we're ready to invite them in for entry-level roles. So really taking a strong stand and delivering business value. And I think gone are the times where we're just having social events and ERGs. Our ERGs are critical to the success of our business. And, you know, there's more to come in Tapestry for sure, but I've really have loved, and part of the reason why I came to Tapestry was just how well they leveraged that employee resource group platform.
I would love to hear from Corey on this same thing, especially since you work, you know, your counterparts are in Europe. So I'd love to know what your personal goals are to, I guess, bring more diversity into the European market. Because I know you had discussed before that you had to basically explain American history to your European counterparts. And I think that's something I have done as well, working in the industry. Even with my dad, who is from Haiti, he didn't grow up here, and he's just like, wow, I really see how Black Americans are mad. He's like, I didn't encounter this until I came here, but I didn't see it so much. So he's like, it's just this, sometimes he's like, I feel crazy saying this as a Black man who has lived in this country for 40 years, that I'm shocked of how racist America can be. So, and he's like, but I guess that's because I'm not from here. So how would you like to bring that to your European counterparts?
Yeah, I mean, I look, there's Americans that don't know American history, right? Because America has a very revisionist approach to its own history, and they've definitely omitted certain things. So it's a conversation worth having globally. I think for me, and I echo Carmen 100%, I think this industry is very incestuous, right? We poach from each other left and right. It's built this myth that in order to be successful in this industry, you had to have worked in this industry. And I think it's the biggest fallacy ever. But that aside, because Carmen did an excellent job of already addressing it, I think for me, there's a couple of things. Tying it to Europe, I think again, I go back to these ideals of what beauty and fashion and aesthetics are. You're just leaving out a large part of the global population, right? Like this idea that it needs to be a size 0 and look a certain way and skin complexion, and it's crazy. Like you can't tell, you know, Black and brown women that their body size can't be celebrated. Like that's ridiculous. And this industry doesn't necessarily account for that in its products and its wares and it's in that. And that to me is a huge miss. And so, you know, personally, the aesthetics and what the ideals of beauty are absolutely need to change. But I also think it's the intersectionality of all of this. I go back to intersection, right? Because, you know, we've steeped this particular conversation today really around ethnicity, but we're leaving out so many other dimensions of diversity, right? We didn't really dive into gender identity. We definitely haven't talked about, you know, disabilities and adaptive fashion as an emerging trend in this industry and what it takes to get dressed with, a physical disability. And so all of it, again, I link to business. There's money being left on the table because you're not addressing all the dimensions of diversity of individuals. And it's the sum of the parts, right? It's not any one dimension. People would look at you, Nicole, and you're right. All they're going to see is Black woman. They're not going to naturally know Haitian parentage and lineage, right? Like, and so there's so many things that you don't get to know about a person if you don't embrace them and invite them in. And all of that is based on this, again, fallacy that difference is less than. That's complete and total foolishness. And until we recognize that somebody has value to contribute because they are different, we're going to continue to lose this conversation battle.
Thank you. Thank you. I see Angela is back. I feel like we're running out of time, so we want to get to that Q&A for sure.
I know, I don't want to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Cassandra, Carmen, Corey, and Nicole for leading this. And for all of you, just a reminder, this Fashion Diversity is just one of the many programs that the Fifth Avenue Association offers. To find out more about what we do, who we are, and especially what we're doing in 2021 to continue conversations like this, please follow us online at www.fifthavenue.nyc and on social media at fifth.avenue.nyc. All of this, it's a lot, is available in the chat button. So let's get to our first question. There were a lot of great questions. The first one, Nicole, you can feel free to send this off to anyone. What is the organization doing to open the door for Black creatives?
Cassandra. I feel like this is like such a, I've spent so much time going to CFDA events. So I just would really love to hear more about that.
Okay, absolutely. I'd love to. Listen, the CFDA has always had the door open for Black creatives. I think, it's just we're amplifying the messaging about where the support is and what we're doing. As I said before, the Designers Hub has been established since 2018. It has 40 BIPOC designers as part of it. Some of your most notable Black designers of the moment have come out of that Designers Hub incubator program. So that is available to you. Again, for anyone with questions, please email info@CFDA. Someone will follow up with you and connect you to the right team. One of the other things that we're doing is we're having this impact program, right? So it's not just for creatives, but it's also for professionals who work with creatives, right? Because they also need entry into the industry as well, are an important part of the matrix of business. So we're working on that angle too. We have a Fashion Fund Incubator program with Vogue. We have, a sustainability fashion manufacturing program. So there are many components in which designers and other professionals can tap into the CFDA for resources. I would implore people to go to www.cfda.com and click resources. There's just such a plethora of programming around scholarships for students in college who need funding. We have other, learning programs, learning engagements. We have, other adaptive clothing series. So there's a plethora of programming. If you just go to www.cfda.com, you can find out more about it in detail. But that is how we're tapping into designers. We're also letting the designers lead the conversation as well. We're making them part of, the groups that are establishing these guidelines. So for instance, our Black Advisory Board is made up of Tracy Reese, who is the chair, Martin Cooper, who used to design for Burberry and Belstaff, and it's made up of other industry professionals, Amira Nasir from Hearst, and Bazoma St. John from Netflix, and Stacey Henderson, who leads e-commerce at Todd's Group. So we're trying to bring in different voices, capable people, intelligent people who have worked in other industries, but have also, now come into fashion and really, have some ideas about where we can go with the programming. So those are some of the things that the CFDA is doing. And we just encourage people to reach out, info@cfda.com. Email me directly, c.diggs@cfda.com. We're happy to engage with you and get you on the right track.
Can I add something here? Because I've seen it come up a couple of times in the chat as well. This idea of the creatives being a standalone entity in this industry. And I want to, again, I've only been in this industry for 6 months, but I've worked in other industries like sports, where the players are separate from the corporate folks, like entertainment. I was in TV and film, where like the directors and the producers and the actors were separate from. Like this idea of creatives versus suits, it's not 100% genuine, in that the creatives are hired by the suits. Right? And so the executives at these maisons hire the creative directors. And so this idea that you can operate in this industry only as a designer or only as a creative and be insular and exist in this bubble without ever engaging or interacting with the corporate side of the business is complete and total nonsense. And people need to stop living in that dream. I want to be able to tell the creative side of this industry the same thing I would tell somebody that's about to start a job in finance. You have to network. And part of that networking involves the suits. It involves the corporate side. You can't make it in this business without the executive side of this industry. And I don't know that the creative side completely wants to embrace that, quite honestly, because yes, you do have creative license and you don't want to stifle your creativity, all the stuff that, again, I've heard in a bunch of other industries that I've been in. But the reality is the two have to coexist. And so you talk about mentoring, you talk about sponsorship, you talk about networking. That has to happen with the suits as well. I know you guys don't want to hear that, but that's part of it. And I just feel like there's this complete and total separation, yet they get mad when the suits make the decisions about who becomes the next executive creator, next executive designer, and you weren't part of that conversation. Well, maybe because you weren't networking with them.
That's so true, Corey. And one of the things we do with our programming is we always pair creatives with business professionals, because you have to have that balance. And I think professionals need to understand the creative mindset, and creatives need to understand the business mindset. That's the only way that this works. So
Absolutely.
That's great.
I feel like most of the designers, the creatives that are successful, have been able to marry the two. I know,
and it works both ways.
I am
it works
a creative,
both ways,
but
right?
I also spend a lot of time meeting with the suits and discussing business, because at the end of the day, I can want to make a beautiful picture, but the beautiful picture might not pay my bills. So that's just the truth. There is a business aspect to all of it. So you need to learn business. And I say that, I'm sorry that I know I'm not one of the panelists, but I would like to tell anyone young out there, learn business. If you want to have a bag line, learn the business. You can draw to your heart's content, but you need to learn the business as well. Otherwise, you stay flat. You need to know that networking skill. It's really important. And to understand like how to make money, how to get investors, all of that. It's like, so thank you, Corey. Thank you.
Yeah, amazing.
Hey, well, we have time for a couple more questions. The next one is, what strategies are being placed for equity in fashion?
Well, Carmen.
So I think I was just sitting back listening to this sort of creatives versus suits, because, I think part of what has kept this separation going is that there have been times when either side of that fence is impenetrable. And I think you cannot deny that. I think part of what equity looks like at our organization is being very intentional about creating the platforms, the opportunities, be it special projects or mentorship programs that intentionally put people who are, historically underrepresented, marginalized, however you want to put it, with people that are not, right? With the suits. Put retail with corporate, put creatives with corporate. And I think you have to be intentional about creating these opportunities. However, I say that with a caveat of something that my leader brought up to me, was like, Carmen, we have to be careful with othering, because you want to create equity and give people what they need, knowing that they may have started 10 miles behind everyone else, but you also want to do it in a way that doesn't box out a BIPOC employee and make them feel like an other, because that doesn't feel good either. And then we're back to having the affirmative action conversation, right? So I think there's a balance about being intentional, giving people, maybe prioritizing the needs of, the burning platform, right, of more Black and Latinx representation in our leadership, but not boxing out other people that, guess what, have also been historically marginalized, right? Look at what's happening with Asian Americans in the United States, right? I'm seeing Black boxes around Asian Americans, Stop Asian Hate now, right? And so there's always going to be something. How do you remain inclusive while applying equitable standards and programs to help advance communities that are all at totally different places and have different needs, and also want to get to different places, right? We assume all creatives want to get into leadership or want to get into corporate roles. Many do not. Many just aspire to have an independent brand, right? And are using corporate as a platform, or large fashion houses as a platform off of which to launch. Some do. I was speaking with one of our, a creative and our shoe designers say, I really would like more leadership development opportunities, in corporate. So these are all very individualized, and sort of treating those, hearing out for them, creating the platforms where these conversations can happen. I think that's critical. And then sort of the prescriptive part of how you apply equity, that's almost going to happen person by person, function by function, right? Brand by brand. And it's going to take, this is the part that's going to take a very long time. That's sort of my 2 cents on equity.
Well said. Our final question is, what are some creative examples of sourcing candidates from underrepresented communities?
Wow, I feel like all of you can definitely answer this, but I would love to hear just a little bit from each one of you, because I think it's important, because I feel like you all have different strategies in doing this. So Corey, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I can go first. We've aligned with a couple of different organizations to offer up sourcing options. We have, so again, on our wines and spirits side, Moet Hennessy, they have a partnership with Thurgood Marshall College Fund, in which Thurgood Marshall gives us 10 fellows every year. And it's not necessarily an internship, but it's more about a career development. So they basically shadow some of our executives. We give them like real life applications and skills that they learn by basically sitting in meetings and participating in our day-to-day work environment. Out of that, because it's not an internship, so there's no guaranteed job at the end of it. But out of it, literally every year that we've been doing it, a few of those have been hired unintentionally, because again, we didn't go into it with the purpose of hiring, but it's an opportunity to literally showcase yourself. There's only 10, right? Like imagine you've got a full brand at your disposal for 8 months, 10 months, whatever the case is, it's your time to shine. And so folks have definitely been onboarded as a result of our partnership with Thurgood Marshall. Our HR, the brands are very different, right? And you've got the really big brands, the Vuittons, the Sephoras, the Moet Hennessy's, the Dior's. And then we've got a ton of small brands that nobody's ever heard of. There's wines that you don't even get distributed here in the United States. Our whole Kendo division, those are considered our smaller brands, the Pucci's and the Marc Jacobs and the Fenty, for that matter. Fenty's still a growing brand, and it's still a small brand in comparison to some of our larger ones. And so we've had to diversify how we source and where we source from. There's a difference between, I've got one open position at a small brand that only has 200 employees total, versus I've got one position open in a brand that has 2,000 employees. And so what that needs to look like, and there's differences in strategy around that, does vary. But we are looking to increase our partnerships. There's tons of LinkedIn-esque companies out there that are focused on diversity, companies like Jopwell, and there's a bunch of others that are doing some great things in curating databases that are diverse only. And so, again, I've only been here 6 months. You got to give me a minute to set some of this stuff up. But those are the types of things that we're going to be looking to do, really align with. What I didn't mention intentionally was HBCUs, right? And that became like once allies heard about HBCUs last year, like everybody was like, oh my God, let's just go partner with HBCUs. And I want to be intentional around what that partnership looks like. Because again, the reality of our industry is, oh, you've got to have 2 to 3 years working experience in this industry before I'll hire you. And so if I can't break down that wall right away, then I need to be intentional about what our approach to HBCUs is, because the last thing I want to do is start showing up at these colleges telling all these kids LVMH is open for business, but graduating seniors can't get a job with us because we're not hiring because they don't have any experience. So it's this circle that I have to figure out a way to get ourselves out of, because all that does is disenfranchise graduating college students. Yeah, they keep coming to my campus, they keep showing up at our career fairs, but nobody's hiring me. And so that's not genuine either. And so, I'd rather use the collegiate academia experience to brand ourselves as an employer of choice. Like, look, we are going to hire you given these appropriate steps and measures. Really plan it out, really communicate what the strategy needs to be, rather than just show up, take a bunch of resumes, but I'm never calling any of these folks. So I don't want to be disingenuous in our approach either.
Amazing approach. We're doing the same. I mean, we're tapping into some of the same resources. I think, Corey brought up a good point about going into a pipeline or a gateway that's not typical. So going into CUNY and SUNY universities. I am a graduate of the City University of New York. I would not be a typical candidate for a job in fashion, yet I am here. Thank you. I think also what CFDA is doing is looking at a paid internship matching grant program through our impact program, because again, removing the barrier to entry, giving people the opportunity to come into the industry, learn, get paid for the learning, and possibly get an opportunity for a more permanent job in the industry. The other thing we're assessing is if we have to go pre-college, maybe college is not soon enough to engage with the underrepresented, underserved communities and get them interested in careers in fashion. So should we be looking at high schools? Should we be looking at junior high and elementary schools and really, educating them on all of the opportunity that's available in this industry, and then preparing them that way? So we're looking at those alternatives as well.
Thank you.
And if I can add, I know we're at time, but just, I think we've explored all of those things, but there's also a large untapped market in our retail spaces. These people have work experience. These people know our brands. Mm-hmm. And so part of our strategy includes creating additional pathways for our retail associates to get into managerial roles. Our Kate Spade stores have a program called LEAD, which gets our store leadership teams into like district leadership roles, and there's a whole talent, development program attached to it. But I think we have a lot of great BIPOC representation at the retail level. The talent's there, they know us, they love us. Like that's another, big talent pipeline that we are prioritizing as an organization as well. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. That makes me think of Jenna Lyons, who I think started out as a sales associate at J. Crew, and then, someone paid attention to her and what she was doing, and look where she is now. So thank you so much to everyone. I know we are completely out of time, so I will pass it off.
Thank you. But I think it's wonderful that our participants are staying, even though we're past the hour. So thank you all for joining. It was a true privilege to host you all today. I want to thank Carmen, Corey, Cassandra, and Nicole. I also want to thank the brands, Tapestry and LVMH, for making these speakers available to us, which I think is tremendous. I took many notes during these really phenomenal conversations, but I just want to keep it simple and say a message that resonates for me, which is something that I know we believe here, is that diversity, equity, and inclusion are good for business, and that's what we should all focus on. And finally, thank you to the CFDA, which is such a tremendous partner, and I hope we'll have more initiatives with them. We'll invite you all again. I hope you thought your time was well spent with us, and I wish you a great end to your day. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Angela and Jerome and panelists. This was amazing. I really loved getting to know you all.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you
yes,
guys
we
so
recorded the session, and we can make it available. I'm seeing some questions in the chat.
Awesome. Wishing you all well.